get started. So the hardest part, even for me, when I first learned this product existed, was how does it fit into all these other Zoho products? We've got blueprints, we've got flow, we've got workflow rules, we have creator. So my first thing is to make sure everyone's on the same page and actually understand how this product fits in. So we start with what is a business process, right? If this, then that. That's what we call inside all the Zoho products pretty much is a workflow rule, right? So you have some sort of criteria that has to happen or that needs to be filled in, and then an action is triggered. The problem with that right now is that a workflow rule is only able to complete a single process within a single application. And we have a lot of people asking about coordinating processes between applications. And there are ways to do that right now. We've seen people build process management in Creator. People are using custom functions. People have used Zoho Flow, which again, there's some confusion here. I'll clear that up. Zoho Flow is to simply just send data between applications. This is going to be a way to if you know what the blueprint is in CRM, this is a way to create a flow chart of information between applications. This is not only just Zoho applications, but third-party applications as well. Zoho Flow can be used in conjunction with Zoho Orchestly because you can trigger flows from your blueprint that you create inside Orchestly itself. So that's kind of how they all fit together. In a real business or in real life, we're coordinating multiple processes at the same time. We can't be confined to a single department. When we talk about Zoho One or CRM Plus, we want to coordinate multiple applications together. And that's where this idea came for creating an application for business orchestration. That's where the name was derived from. So let's talk about a process first that we can all relate to, and that would be hiring a new employee. So I'm going to walk you through how a typical company, kind of a medium-sized business, would handle hiring a new employee, and then we'll put that together inside the application and how it would translate. So let's say we have a sales team and a bunch of sales reps. We're going to reference some people in our company. So Joel is our sales manager, and he's running reports in the CRM, and he sees that there is a need for a new sales rep. So he's going to ask his boss, can I go ahead and hire someone new? So what does he do? Well, typically he's going to send an email if the boss is, in a different office, or if he's not reachable. Send an email, send a chat. Then you wait for a reply. The boss sees the report, says, "Okay, Joel, I'll go ahead and let you hire someone new, but I need to get it approved by the VP of sales." So he sends another email, and Joel's patiently waiting. It's been 2-3 days already. Finally, the VP of sales says, "Cool, let's go ahead and do it." Sends it back to Joel, said, "All right, we're going to go ahead and hire someone new." So then the person in charge of coordinating new sales hire, which would be Joel's boss, sends an email to HR. And then the HR person looks at it, says, "Great, here's the content we posted on Indeed and LinkedIn last time. Can you take a look at it, make sure it's up to date? If there's any changes in your process, we want to make sure the job post is correct." He sends another email back, and he sends another email to Joel. Joel then is going to rewrite the description, get it approved through his manager, get that approved to that manager, go back to HR, right? So now we're back to HR. It's already been, we've wasted 6-7 days, and Joel has no idea what's going on. He sees emails every 3-4 days, doesn't know where this request is. HR goes through its own approval processes. They update the website. They start collecting resumes. 2 weeks later, Joel gets an email, "Hey, we've got 50 resumes for you to go through." He screens all of them. They go through interview processes between HR, between sales, between the VP, between all these different people at the organization. Some companies go up to like 6-7 rounds of interviews, and all that goes in a big circle. And finally, we get that approved, and then that process might go over to payroll to get the compensation plan approved. And then from there, we have contracts, we have hiring, and then we can take it further, training and onboarding. And in between that, we have to deploy, provision devices, like a laptop or a phone or whatever it is. And then that has to go through IT. IT might have approvals depending on the role, what kind of laptop you get. And then finally, Joel gets all of that. 4 weeks later, he's just sitting at his desk patiently waiting while sales is crumbling down. He needs a new person. And he's finally got someone, and he can hire them. So what we've seen here is that process is going to touch possibly 4 different departments: sales, executive, HR, and IT. And then within those departments themselves, we have to update the website. We go through approvals. We go through rounds of interviews. We have to do devices and apps. Those are among some of the transition points that we go through. And this is what it can end up looking like, right? And the hard part is the person who had asked for the request for the job initially, they have no idea what's going on until they email HR. HR might not know what's going on, so they email IT. IT says, oh, we're in the process of buying a laptop. He has no idea what's going on until he goes and finds that information out. And so my challenge to you is when you have a process like this in your company, could you visualize it? Could I challenge you to write it all down and give me a flow chart? Is there a way to follow this? Can I look at this in, if I just got hired into your organization, could I look at it and know how to follow this process? If I hired a new IT manager because the other one left, can they look at it to see how all the internal processes are handled? Or would they have to go through training or come up with their own processes? And so that's the first thing that this application is designed to do, is let you visualize that process. So without any of the other features mentioned, the first thing you can do if you just simply want to do it is just visualize all your processes into a diagram where someone can look into a department and know how that department handles mainly an internal issue like hiring an employee, where you touch multiple people. And then the next thing is, let's dive into the product. So hopefully you get an idea of where this inspiration came from for having an orchestration product. So it's to provide visibility and accountability for internal purposes. So visibility is that the sales manager can now see that their request is in stage 3 or stage 4. It's taken 5 days to get there. The company can see that it took 4 weeks of wasted time to get someone hired into a company, and they can improve on that performance, and because they're able to run reports on the blueprint. So as Vijay mentioned, you can apply these processes to so many different departments. So we talked about IT and operations just now and HR. Let's dive into marketing and finance as well. So in HR, we talked about the new hire request. I mentioned training and onboarding could also have a process of its own. Even when you do a background check, that might trigger another set of processes through other people before then that transition is approved in the hiring process. You could have a blueprint that needs to trigger another blueprint, essentially, finish off, and then finally be able to move to that transition. If someone leaves your company, you might have an exit process for them that they need to go through. In IT, we have things like disaster recovery and auditing that we go through every year. If you are making applications, you have ways to deploy updates to your software or upgrade it, and maybe that's not even mapped out at all at this point. In finance, I know we have some applications for some of this stuff, but if you have a very customized process, it could be used for expensing or financial planning. We'll look at an inventory replenishment workflow as well today. Even for product refurbishment, when you're getting the product back and sending it to get refurbished, replace parts, and then put it back into your inventory. And marketing, this is something that we do internally all the time, is content review, where someone when one department writes an article or a blog post, and then it goes to our content review team, and then they will edit it, and then it goes to their manager for approval, then goes back to their team. Their team may or may not like that, what the changes, and it goes back in another circle. So content review, all those blog posts, even the tweets that we write, they all go through some sort of review process. So it's pretty useful in marketing. Even with a webinar, we have multiple people. We have the sales engineers design the demo accounts. We have design people that are doing the slides. We have marketing that's coming up with the script. So that's a process of its own as well. So let's go ahead and put this all together and show you how you can accomplish this with Orchestly. So before we dive into it, who here has used CRM or Desk Blueprint or sat in on a session and generally understands what that is? Okay. So remember, Blueprint is a feature inside CRM. It will also be a feature inside Orchestly. So once again, Zoho took a feature of one product and turned it into a product of its own. If you've been an old school Zoho user, you saw, remember, campaigns and CRM became a campaigns product. You saw quotes and invoices eventually from CRM became Zoho Books. So we see a need for a more robust application for a particular feature, so we roll it out as its own product. So before we do a demo, I want to make sure everyone understands the rest of the features inside Orchestly. So we'll start with layouts. Layouts, just like in Creator or Forms or in a module, they're just the fields and the sections. So you have different field types available. And then also in the layout section in Orchestly, if you do sign up for early access, you'll be able to create email templates, which are going to be triggered through all these different transitions. They can be used after the transition is completed or during certain criteria that's met in the transition itself. So that's the easy part, just building those, what we call job requests. And then we talk about blueprints. So if you're familiar with blueprint, we know the way to design a blueprint is to have stages or transition points. And at each transition, there's a before, during, and an after. So before is some criteria. During is where you can trigger field updates, notes, and we've added widgets into here as well, like updating an internal database, time tracking, a multi-select checklist that needs to be completed. In CRM, you have only a single level checklist. In Orchestly, you'll get multi-level checklists as well. And we're going to continue to design additional widgets and open up that extensions for you guys to create your own as well. And then we have business rules. So business rules are the workflows you've already seen in CRM. So why would we put workflows on top of the blueprint? Well, the thing is, in blueprint, you can only trigger your functions or your webhooks or your field updates after the transition takes place. What if you want it during the transition? What if that layout that you have has so many different fields in it that after 4 or 5 fields are filled in, you need to trigger other automation before the transition is finished in itself? So we've added the ability to do workflows inside the blueprint, generally during the transition point. And then we also have the webhooks and custom functions that I mentioned. So this marketplace will open up to have additional products, other Zoho apps, third-party applications, and there'll be a gallery of custom functions available to use. If you're familiar with Deluge, of course, you can write your own and implement those inside Orchestly. So you have your layout. We have a blueprint. So that layout is going to turn into a job or a request, and it's going to travel through the blueprint. The job is there for accountability and monitoring. Because when you have a request, you want to know at what point it's reached, how long it's taken to get there, who all has updated anything inside that job itself, and that's way you can see how things are moving along in your process. And depending on your accessibility, you can see all of your jobs, you can see some jobs, you can share jobs between the team, profiles, roles, the same terms you're familiar with. And then more importantly, on the accountability side is the custom reports. So you can see how long it takes to get to the end of a blueprint. You can see where there's a bottleneck or something takes a really long time to transition. You can dig further into it. You can see the blueprint utilization, which blueprints are being used more than others, and then, of course, make your own. So with access control, I mentioned roles and profiles. We added another one called teams. And the reason for that is you might have a team that has different roles in it. So you can't only have roles and profiles, but you can have a sales team with 5, 6 roles in that team itself, and that team needs to all have access to that request or that job to see where it is, or be able to assign it to each other. So there's 3 points of access control. A summary, so your layout becomes a job. Your job is pushed through the blueprint. There's transition points within the blueprint, and within those transition points, you can trigger automation after the transition point, or if you add business rules, during the transition point itself. All right, so I'm going to walk you through all of the same features I just showed you so you can see it inside the product itself. So right now, if you are following along, if you want to just see the website, you can go to orchestly.com. You'll see where you can sign up for it. You can see a nice little video. There is not a lot of documentation for the user guide, so that, again, that's part of the early release. There's just a little bit, so this demo will be helpful for you to understand what all the capabilities are. So we'll start with the users. I won't spend too much time here, right? You can add your users, or you can sync them with Zoho directory. The access control is a mixture of profiles and roles. As you can see, admin, service admin, manager, these are 3 default profiles that are given, and the rest you can make yourself. What does a profile enable? You can see it's about viewing jobs, editing jobs, assigning jobs to others, managing blueprints, and then you can all the way go down to the field level permissions. So all of the fields that you create in your layouts can be read-only, read-write, or hidden, because some people might have to access a job. You don't want them to see all of the different information on there, of course. All right, and then there's your role hierarchy. And then in the user side, you also have the ability to create your teams. Remember, a team, you can be in one team, but in that same team could have multiple roles inside of it. So that's why we have 3 options for you. Moving up, so this is the work in progress extensions marketplace, which will, will use what you see in Zoho Flow so that you can push data between applications. What we have right now, you can see on the screen, there's this multi-level checklist that we've created as a widget for you, so you can have inside each part of the checklist subtasks to complete. There's a widget from Harvest, which allows you to do time tracking within the transition point itself. So we'll continue to add more. Those of you who are developers, you can go ahead and develop your own extensions for Orchestly as well. And we'll skip past that. Let's look at the blueprints. The first thing I'm going to do is pull up our hiring request here. So let's take a look at a few of these. Here's a pretty simple one to follow. So it's color coded, so you can see where the transition points are. When you're inside a job, you're going to see those transitions as buttons. So you might want to give them kind of an action-oriented name like send resume, so people understand what that transition point is actually doing. And when I click on the transition point itself, very familiar, you'll see there's a before, a during, and an after, just like in CRM or Desk. If you go to during, you'll see there's a section for you to add your widgets. What are widgets? Widgets are like mini apps inside of the application itself. So you can have a widget pop open a map, for example, or a third-party application, or an internal application, internal database that needs to be updated. It can pop up, and then they can work with it during the transition itself. And then you can also kind of change the criteria for jobs to passing through the transition. There is a few unique things in here. One of the unique things in here that you don't see in CRM is the ability to automate the transition points. So you can have a transition point like essentially expire after a certain time and then automatically move to the next one. Well, why would you do that? What if you're delivering a perishable item that needs to reach a customer at a certain point? At a 3-day point, it would escalate saying, hey, this hasn't shipped yet. And so the blueprint would auto-escalate for you based on time. You can also push the transitions on criteria. So again, something different from CRM. In CRM, you have to click the next transition point. What if you want to move transition just because people filled in certain fields on the job itself? That's another automation that we have that makes it a little different from the CRM transitions. The rest of it is very, very familiar. I'm going to pull up an example. So let's look at inventory replenishment. So here's another blueprint that we've created for a company that needs to work with warehouse, suppliers, and management. So if you create something like this, one, it stops a lot of paperwork and forms that you have to fill out. They just create the job. Maybe something needs to be replenished before it hits the back order status. And so the warehouse people can just go into their app and create a job. And the management can look at all the jobs and see what is in process, where it's gone from the warehouse to the supplier. If you want to create a widget, you can create a widget to update your backend systems as well. So not only do they create the job, but they can update the backend database on what they've needing to order from the supplier. So all of that can be done within these different transitions. So I just wanted to show you another example, besides a new hire, of different kinds of blueprints available. All right, and so once you have all of these blueprints, then you can add business rules. We've seen workflow rules today, so I won't click on it, but it's the same thing. As a workflow rule, choose the module, or in this case, choose the blueprint, choose the criteria, which is in the layout, and then trigger the workflow rule, which is what? Which is task, field update, custom function, webhook, etc. Remember, it's a little confusing because you will also see business rules in the blueprint itself. The ones in the blueprint only happen after the transition. If you want things to happen during the transition, then you have to add business rules on top of the blueprint. All right, so the customization. This is the layouts and the templates. Let's just look at a form. As you add fields to all of your different layouts, all of those fields can be reused over and over and over. So if you have different blueprints that require the same field types or the same field names, feel free to just reuse them, or you can add your own fields. This looks just like creator or forms anyway, and drag and drop it, add your any field properties that you need to, and you're good to go. All right, so now let's jump over into jobs. Okay. So it kind of looks like the CRM, right? You see your jobs, you have views. If you scroll down here, you've got the ability to make custom views across your own team. You can even base it on the layout and add your own. So what we see here, if I'm in management, I see all of the open jobs. I can see when they're due. I can see the current status of it. And if I click on it, it opens up the layout, and it tells me the current stage. This one looks like I don't have access to it anymore, so it must be at another point for approval or with someone else on the team. And if I want to see where we're at right now, it quickly tells you here as well. And then you see some of these are in blue. The blue ones are called common transitions. You see that in CRM as well. Because with recruitment, you could reject that recruitment at any point in the blueprint. So we have something called a common transition. So that one is able to be canceled at any point. That transition point will always show up. If I want to create a job, I can see all of my blueprints. There's icons that you can associate with the different blueprints so you can quickly understand what each one is about. So if we go to one of these, I can go ahead and roll out that job and create it for someone, and they'll be able to take it to the next step. All right. So let me go ahead and let's add a recruitment. And you can see there's job criteria that needs to be filled in before we can start the blueprint. So let's go ahead and fill this out super quick. All right, we can put a due date on it. I can select a priority if I want to, and there we go. So the job is created, okay? And you can see here straight away, I don't have access to the next stage because that's now going to someone else for approval. But I'll be able to see if that person makes the approval, I'll be able to see the activities here, okay? Let's go to one that is specifically assigned to me. Let me see if I can find one real quick. Maybe just add another one. We'll do a purchase request. I can pick the item, quantity, department, etc. Go ahead, hit save. Okay, so this one goes straight to me to handle the next step. So I can see, I can approve it, I can reject it, and then if I want to see what's coming up next, this is what happens. Oops. If I go ahead and approve it, then it goes to my manager. If I put it on hold, right, it goes over to this status. If I reject it, it automatically finishes the blueprint. So if I make updates to this, let's say I want to go ahead and put a reason here and save that. It'll say job has been updated. And then down here, right, I'm able to get some accountability on what's going on with that piece itself. And then if I go ahead and hit approve, I can move it to the next step. And at that point, if I want to add attachments, I can add comments to the blueprint, and it continues to update the activities, right? And so if you had any widgets, when you hit this next button, the widget would be able to be popped up right here. You fill in the fields, your checklist, your multi-select checklist, and all of that. If you want your widget to show up within the job itself, let's say something like this, you want it to show up on the right, like a time tracker. If you use the Harvest plugin, the time tracker will show up on the right-hand side, just built in right into Orchestly itself. So you can start time tracking the job, okay? So that's a little bit about how the jobs work, and we'll end right here with the reporting section. So here, this looks, again, similar to CRM. You can see in this particular blueprint, there are 12 jobs in the rejection state. If I look at job distribution, I can see who is working on how many jobs at the same time. I can analyze where there might be bottlenecks in the blueprints themselves. I can break it down and drill down to that level. I can look at the stages themselves and how many days. I can also see how stages were utilized because I might have multiple transition points and branch outs. I can see which stages are more popular or are used more than others. And then, of course, you can create and drill down your own blueprint-based charts from here. Okay, so where does this go from here? So what we want you to be able to do here is able to interact with multiple Zoho products and third-party products to create workflows that can handle interdepartmental types of requests. All right, thank you, everybody.